ocean's whisper calls my name. Depth and longing in my soul, seeking more than just this game. Waves crash softly at my feet, echoes in my heart so deep. Eyes on horizon far and true, longing for a love so steep. Deep calls to deep inside of me, where the sky meets endless sea. Heartbeats blend with ocean's roar, seeking depth I can't ignore. Echoes in my heart so deep, eyes on horizon far and true, longing for a love so steep. Deep calls to deep inside of me, where the sky meets endless sea. Heartbeats blend with ocean's roar, seeking depth I can't ignore. Shells and sand beneath my toes, tides reveal what ebb and flows. In the quiet still I hear whisper longings crystal clear. Deep calls to deep inside of me, where the sky meets endless sea. Heartbeats blend with ocean's roar, seeking depth I can't ignore. Desire, burning with a holy fire. Depth of love beyond all dreams, in the vastness it redeems. Deep calls to deep inside of me, where the sky meets endless sea. Heartbeats blend with ocean's roar, seeking depth I can't ignore.
Hi.
Let me add myself to the stage there.
I was like, hey, I'm looking pretty
awesome.
good here. Show.
That's awesome. Oh boy, it's been a crazy little bit. So I thought it'd be fun to just kind of surprise everybody and just jump on and just talk about nothing or something or whatever. So who knows? It's always a surprise when we just do these surprise live streams of what we're doing. So hey, it's Roddy. Always love it when Roddy shows up. So they had 2 goats born at his house. Yeah, this morning or yesterday, I don't remember. This morning, I think.
They milk them? I wonder.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I see him there. Yeah, I do. I go on camera now because I have to be accountable to everything I say, and it makes it a lot easier to not be a jerk when you have to show your face. It's amazing.
I adore you. I just, I do. I do. You're one of my favorite friends. You really are. One of my favorite streaming friends. It's going to go to your head, but that's okay. Hey, Sam. And then, there's Sam. Sam's joining us too. So I just mostly was thinking that we just finished a really fantastic episode on Tyler's giving you some crap in the chat there.
I know. I'm sorry. I've been streaming a lot too. Like I did it. I promised a friend who wanted to argue for a Wednesday crucifixion, which I don't agree with, but he's supported me really a lot. And so I wanted to give him an opportunity because it's on his heart. And then another friend who I did shows with wanted to do a show too. And I did that. That's why I missed otherwise I would have totally been there. I didn't realize it ahead of time. I need to keep track of that better. But then
that's okay.
I've done like 4 or 5 hours of streaming today.
Oh, no wonder you look so tired. Well, thank you for coming, man.
I'm glad to be here. Sam Carter.
That's awesome. I know. Sam is joining us. I feel honored. Actually, it was Tyler and I were just talking about Sam a minute ago. So, yeah. And it was all good, Sam.
I'll definitely be watching the Faith and Altar. Just probably while I'm laying in bed.
Yeah, that was it was fun. We had a ton of fun and talking about Fortnite and gaming and how to represent well in everywhere you go, basically. And saying that, just talking about how to represent in spaces. And it was specifically video gaming this time. But it just kind of got me thinking about I was just laughing at Sam down there wanting a full report of the conversation with Tyler. So the full report, Sam, is that we think you're awesome. That's what it is. That's the full report.
He got Berceau on, right, with them. Is that right? Is that the same Sam Carter?
Yeah. He was a big part in connecting Leighton Flowers and Berceau to make that conversation happen. Sam needs a big shout out for that, because that was a really good conversation too. Actually, I didn't get to watch the whole thing, and sorry, Sam, I haven't gone back to watch the rest of it yet. I'm just starting to emerge from my 2-day post-school coma and starting to be functional. My brain hasn't completely solidified yet, but it was just about oatmeal by the time I got done there on Wednesday. When I turned that last thing in, I was just like, I am not going to think for a whole, that lasted about 5 minutes. But, I'm going to put this up here because Sam is another person that I absolutely adore. So we definitely need to let him brag about the fact that he got in this whole Leighton Flowers and I can't pronounce his last name. I'm terrible with that kind of thing. But that Sam got that, connected, and that happened on Soteriology 101, and it was also streamed to Idol Killer. So a lot of people got to see that. And I hear rumors that he and Idol Killer are going to hook up and going to have a video there. Berceau, thank you, Sam. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I knew. I mean, it was like I knew Warren. I knew that Leighton Flowers was gonna say his name wrong. I knew it. I always like to make fun of it because Warren's such a nice guy. He's such a great guy, and I've made streams about him before. I'm like the country bumpkin in the middle of nowhere, just teasing because he doesn't really know who I am, but you know what I mean. He's got that accent or whatever. It's charming. So
his Texas accent,
person, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I got to meet him when I went down to that ETS conference down in San Diego, and that was fun. I had a blast. I got actually to talk to him for quite a bit, and he asked me several questions about Old Testament stuff, and so in the conversation about the Old Testament stuff I was trying to explain. Sam, you were venerated, I think. I think everybody. He actually put up your comment that he left him a voicemail with how to pronounce it, and that Leighton did fess up for that. So I'm gonna put this up here. Yes, Leighton did confess that he did not know how to pronounce his name, but it wasn't your fault. So you were vindicated.
I was actually like, he's gonna mispronounce his name. I know it, and I was like, cringing, kind of like, I don't want him to do it but it was kind of fun, But
half the time Leighton has challenges pronouncing his own name, so it's a given he's going to mispronounce somebody else's name too. Oh, it's Troy. It's my favorite Orthodox brother, man. I love it. Hey, Troy. So now I forgot where I was. What was I talking about? I don't remember. Oh, yes, meeting Leighton Flowers. Okay, so I was hanging out with Nick Quint, and I was hanging out with Nick Quinn at ETS, and he's like, hey, I'm going to go to this cigar bar with the boys and have some, I'm just going to be getting myself in trouble all over the place. I got to stop watching the chat. Y'all are going to get me in trouble. So he's like, I'm gonna go get cigars and bourbon with the boys, and you want to go? And I was like, okay, I guess, sure, why not? And that was a very interesting experience, because that I do want to talk about, because this is a thing that and I'm probably going to get in trouble for this too, but that's okay, because it won't be the first time I got in trouble today, and I'm totally okay with getting in trouble when it's a good thing. So we got in there and we went and sat in that little area where everybody was sitting. I'm not going to name very many names because I just am not going to, but over in the area where Nick and I were sitting, there was a gentleman from a very conservative place on our map, and he was fairly ungracious to towards me because I was the female in the room, and he made a couple of comments about not women didn't belong there, and refused to talk to me and wouldn't even look at me, and until Nick kind of squared up with him. Didn't talk to Nick either because he brought the female with him, and but Nick was having none of it. So he was doing some showing off a project of some stuff that he did as a hobby, showed it to everybody sitting there except Nick and I. And Nick was like, hey, I want to see too. So he showed Nick, and then Nick kind of looked over at me, and I was just like, it's not worth it. And pretty much. And then after a while, when Nick kept pulling me into the conversation, then the guy, I think he got a little tired of having to, interact with a female in that space. So he got up and went and talked to some other guys that, went and talked to the boys over by themselves without me there, which was fine. And then that left a few other guys, and sometimes it's a little difficult to tell in those spaces because there was some very recognizable YouTube names there. And I'm not going to name any of them because it just doesn't need to be named. But there were some very, very big YouTube names there that I got to see. I got to meet a few of them. There was one I didn't get to meet that I really wanted to, but I'm still kicking myself for that. That was my own fault, being a chicken.
I'm guessing in my head, but I think I know.
Well, I'll message you later and tell you who it is, but I don't want to name names because I don't call people out in a bad way on my channel, so I'm not going to do that. But
I know Arthur was sitting there smoking cigars. No comment. Just kidding.
But there was several people sitting there, but it was hard to tell because there's also this thing in the YouTube streaming world when you get around, if your channel doesn't have so many subs, if you're so small, they don't acknowledge you either. So, which, I get when you've got a big platform and you've got all these little people trying to, make their channel bigger by getting on and, using your platform to get themselves bigger following. That would be annoying. So it's not without its reason behind it. So, but it was very interesting to watch because a couple of these guys would not even acknowledge that I was sitting there for a little bit, from my perspective. So, okay. And it wasn't until I studied a couple of things. One, I ended up talking to a guy whose wife was also working on a master's in Old Testament that was going to be going on to work on her PhD. So we were comparing notes about all kinds of cool Old Testament stuff, which got interest from somebody that was sitting in the circle that had been ignoring me before just because of the sheer force of my knowledge of the Old Testament, I guess, or my sheer brilliance or something. I'm not sure what, but it got his attention. And so we had some real interesting conversation there for a minute. But at that point, Leighton Flowers came in, and you could just tell the whole room, like the big dog was there. Like even there was a couple people who had bigger channels than Leighton who were still
but he's so hot right now.
Well, you could just tell the big dog was in the room. Leighton
And he's
just
literally
has
the
air
biggest dog
respect.
too, isn't he?
He's
He's
very
tall, right?
tall. Yes, he's very tall. Yeah. So, but we were sitting over there, and it was really funny because at one point, like he came in, he sat down, he says hi, hi to everybody, and just doing the Texas wave thing. And after a couple minutes, Nick leaned over and he was like, Leighton, and like to really like get his like make eye contact with him to be like, hey, hi, it's Nick, to get his attention. And it was funny just watching. Like he was like, oh, you could just tell it clicked in his head because they had never met in person before this. It was just back and forth over YouTube, right? And so just watching Leighton was like, hey, Nick, it's good to see you, and so they chatted for a second. And then Nick made it a point to be like, hey, hey, I brought Amber with me. And he pointed over because I was sitting next to him. He like pointed over at me as Leighton. And Leighton's reaction was the biggest reaction of surprise, like happy surprise of the person to be there out of the entire cigar bar. Like I got the biggest, like, hey, like excited to see you reaction out of everybody. And that made me super uncomfortable because I'm like, I'm just going to crawl back over here behind Nick and just hide for a little bit because I don't like this is way too much attention for me. Whatever. But then he got sidetracked by somebody else that had an agenda. Like they were there waiting for Leighton to show up because they wanted to talk to Leighton, which that happens. And so after he was done talking to Leighton, and then I was kind of moving around the circle a little bit to talk. And I ended up, the guy who was done with Leighton, his agenda, got up to go talk to somebody else. So I jumped over in the seat next to Leighton, and I was just like, Leighton, he's like, oh, good. I'm glad I didn't even get my sentence out. I didn't get to say anything. He was like, oh, good. So he starts just plying me with Old Testament questions. And he's just like, so, he was just plying me with questions like, how do you read this? And does this refute Calvinism? And does this? And I was just like, okay, Leighton, hang on. You're working from a premise where the soteriology is not primary in the mind of the Old Testament. The Old Testament does not care about soteriology. I'm sorry, it doesn't. There's a lot more things at play that are much more important here. I'm gonna get myself in trouble, so we may as well just go all the way and get in trouble. There's a lot more important things. I said, but what you have to understand is a lot of the misinterpretation that's going on and some of the bad reading is because when Martin Luther broke the Old Testament, people they don't know how to read it properly because it's in the wrong order. And he just was like, he shut this discussion down in the entire area where we were sitting. He was like, how was I today old before I learned that Martin Luther broke the Bible? How does that work? And Nick was sitting there just laughing the entire time, having a great time watching this whole conversation. And he's like, he jumped in. He's like, yeah, this is how it works. Like explaining to him that the Reformation and Luther and how he hated the book of James and tried to get rid of Ezekiel and all this stuff. And so, and he was like, Leighton turns back to me and it's like, explain this. So I'm explaining to him canonical narrative and how the books in their original order have a theme. And if you take if you take the Marvel movies and if you break them up and scramble them in a different order, you can kind of get the story, but there's a bunch you're going to miss because you're watching them out of order. Right. And he's like, that makes sense. So I gave him some homework. I was like, you know what? I dare you. Go read the Old Testament in the Tanakh order. But I didn't think it was going to take me seriously. Right. I'm just like, he's just, he'll go look up the Tanakh order and get a little bit of information.
I have a reference for that.
And yeah, he has been listening to it in the Tanakh order. I checked in with him every so often. I'll message him and be like, how's it going? And he hasn't hit anything. Last time I checked in with him, he hadn't hit anything different yet in the different order. But I was like, hey, by the way, while you're reading, here's a tip. Keep in mind the theme of the book you just finished on your way into the next book. And they all come with you. Like each one is a train car behind the engine. So keep all of that with you, every theme that you're collecting as you're going. So I'm just trying to explain this to him. And so when I checked in on with him one day when I was like, "How's it going?" I was like, "Hey, would you like to come on my show and talk about how this has changed how you see the Old Testament?" Like, I just was really curious to see after reading it in the canonical order what you learned from this. And he messaged me back later, and he's like, "Oh, actually, I want to save that. I'll do it, but I want you to come on my show first and and talk about all this on my show." And I was just like, holy moly, how in the world did I end up getting invited to come on Soteriology 101? That was crazy.
I'm not. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. When is that going to be?
It was crazy.
Do you have a
that is scheduled? Yes, January 22nd. That's going to be cool. January 22nd. So, yep, I'll send you a reminder the day before, and when I get the link and everything. So, but yeah, so that I was just like, wow. So that's kind of crazy. Because he was like, "Yeah, we need to bring you on my show and talk about it," when we were sitting in San Diego and talking. And I was like, yeah, okay. I tell a lot of people they need to come on my channel and talk about stuff, and that never happens. That's just kind of a YouTube thing. Like, hey, you should come talk about that on my show, and then it never happens. But then in that morning, he texted me, and I was like, holy cow. I can't believe I'm going to show up on Soteriology. That to me, but that was more like, oh my gosh, that's terrifying, because you know how many people watch that show. I'm like, wow, that sounds like a really big way to get myself in trouble to say something on that big of a channel.
A little bit of trouble might get you, some years though too. But yeah, totally. You realize, wow, I have to actually prepare for this.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah,
like you want to be that way with everybody, but I mean, it's nerve-wracking.
It was insane. It was hilarious. So that I think it's going to be fun, because I've talked to Leighton on Rogues Gallery before, and we've Kyle.
Oh yeah,
we've been on I've been on Rogues Gallery with him. So he's really super nice too. And and on that space, I have managed to, from several of the guys that I've been on there with, I've earned a lot of respect and credibility just because I happen to know what I'm talking about. So I've won over a few of them to thinking about why it's important to understand the Old Testament, and why it's important to read it in the narrative, and why it's important to understand it in the canonical order. So like, I'm winning them over, winning them over a little bit to my side. That may not be to the exclusionary important, but it's important to at least have read it that way once or so.
Well, I can think all sorts of reasons why your approach works my agenda as well. So no, I'm just kidding. You're what was I going to say? I remember when the thing that really cemented to me is when I think you can just tell Warren, I always call Warren Leighton sometimes, but for some reason, but like Leighton is clearly a loving person. Like, he like, I'll never forget when he was developing his provisionism thing, which I identified with largely. And a lot of people I knew were like, "Oh, he's a Baptist. He's once saved, always saved." And I was like, I wonder. And I asked him, I forget if I super chat or whatever. I was like, because everybody was saying, "No, you're not a provisionist because you think you could." A lot of people are coming after me. And I asked him, I was like, "Do you include people who think they can lose their salvation?" And he addressed that, and I just thought that did it for me for that he was inclusive in that way. And then he's talked about it since, and I always had respect for him since then, especially because so many people from that sort of background are very I don't want to talk bad about people. I just mean they don't usually like me very much.
Well, I adore you. I absolutely adore you. So you've always got me, if nothing else.
Yeah, I've got. Yeah. Got
anyway, so it's been crazy. And so I wanted to very, very carefully in my own try to be positive way. I think say a little bit about some of the school thing, because a lot of people have heard me mention that I had to transfer schools. And so And even in the people that I have talked to about it with, I've tried to be careful, with not naming names and not, demonizing anybody in the situation, because it's just one of those things that happen. So I'm not going to go into a lot of the nitty gritty details, but I just kind of wanted to just talk about a little bit about the experience and having to change schools, and just kind of like life happens. Right. So when I decided to go back to school, and I was looking at local seminaries because I wanted an in-person program, because part of the point was to get into a classroom, and that's my favorite way of learning, is to sit there and just pester the poor professor with questions the entire time, right? And to be able to just have that, and I've made some wonderful friends, and I've had some amazing experiences and some amazing professors, and so that was okay. But when I started last fall, they called an all student meeting in November, end of October, and announced that the school had been bought by another school down in California. And again, I'm not going to really name names because I don't think it matters to the story. So they announced that it had been bought out, and that immediately just really sent me into orbit. And then, as I was listening to them talk about, the board admitted to bad management, that finances had been mishandled. There had been a lot of administrative failure, and that was pretty much the reason why the school was in trouble. And if they had not been bought out, that the school would have closed by the end of that semester, and so it would have just gone under completely. And then that took me to a place in my head, because I went through, my undergrad experiences were not very positive from the things that I went through. And so it was like, okay, I don't want to go through this again. This is not good. It's not a good thing. It's not, we'll see what they do. Knowing that school, who they were, their history, I was just like, let's watch them and see what they do. And it was not, in fairness, was not as bad as I thought it could be, but it was bad enough that I had to leave. And, it is one thing to say, and I will say this in fairness too, when you come in and you take ownership of something, it needs to be brought into alignment with your vision and your values. And the school that was trying to hold things in a dual tension of people who wanted to pursue ministry. They had some really good programs for training people to go into ministry, or to, nurturing your ministry stuff. But they also had a track where they were trying to help launch people into academia. So we were working on PhDs, getting into, maybe be a professor, getting into research, that scholarship, that kind of thing. So
Making
they had a percentage
and pastors, right. Basically. Okay.
Yeah, doing both. Right. And the incoming school decided their focus of their whole institution is Christian leadership. And so they stripped out most of the heart of the academic focus of the program. And so it really made it hard. And it just, for me, made it, watching that process of transitioning from what was to what was going to be. They shifted everything to night classes. And so, they had before, all their classes were on Mondays and Tuesdays in the seminary. So you just knew to schedule your life around your classes were going to be on Mondays and Tuesdays. And that's just the way it was. And they decided to try to increase enrollment. They moved them to night classes and eliminated day classes in the seminary. And one of the things that was special about that place was there was a very much in the seminary. It's hard to do when you're in seminary. most of them are older. Most of them are married. They have lives, they have kids, they have jobs. It's a very, like, it's intense with the demands on your life. That is all of that's involved in that. So having a lot of extra time to do all the crazy stuff that the undergrads did, that would it's just, they don't have that kind of time in seminary. You just don't. But because of the way they structured their program and all of your classes were on Mondays or Tuesdays, that left to where you'd have 2 classes on one day, and there was time in between. And if it was close enough time in between, everybody hung out. So a lot of people brought their lunch with them. We'd go over to the coffee shop and hang out. So there was about as much of a thriving student community as you can get in a seminary, with everybody's life demands and stuff. So but that, when they moved it in this fall to night classes, when your first class starts at 5:30 p.m. and your second class ends at 9:30 p.m., you're not spending a lot of time before and after hanging out, chatting as students. You get 5 minutes in between classes. So you got to run, refill your water, use the restroom, get a breath of air, and then you're right back into class again. And so the thriving student community that we had was instantly dead. And those of us who had been in it were trying to keep that alive. But when you are running in at 5:30 at night, after you've tried to get your family set up and make sure that they've got dinner taken care of and that they've, all of that stuff, and then you have to dash out at the end because it's 9:30 at night, and most of us still had a half hour or more drive home, and it's going to be 10 o'clock at night, and you've got homework to turn in and stuff you got to do and get to bed. I mean, it completely killed the student community,
It's almost like a setup, it seems like.
Well,
Like,
I mean,
how could that work? I mean,
well, in fairness to them, more people are able to take night classes than are to be able to take day classes, realistically. So it turned out to be a numbers game, sadly. And that's just the reality. If you don't have students, you don't have a school. You don't have the tuition money, so you can't pay people. So you can't afford to exist. So, and the problem is the students who are in the transition. So those of us who knew differently were grieving what was no longer. The new students coming in, all they know is the new culture. So they're used to that. They're used to the online, all of the interaction they're trying to shove it to the online chats in the platform that they were using, and really pushing, interact in there and talk in there. And I hate that kind of thing. So I didn't do that nearly at all. And so it's just the change between what was and what was coming. So I don't think, I would hesitantly say that when their transition is complete and everyone who is from the old is gone, that it has the potential to be a very good Christian leadership training program. So I will not publicly vilify that school by name, because I think there's potential for good there. But I don't think they were as responsible with the care of the transitioning students as they could have been. And some of us who have existing trauma from collegiate experiences in the past really got thrown in the wood chipper. So, but that's as negative a thing as I'm going to say about the whole thing, because it could have been done better, but it could have been done worse. It was not something that I could stay and watch any longer. It just wasn't. So I had to make the difficult decision to go to a school. Now I'm at a program which I met with the president of the seminary on Tuesday, and I met with my advisor on Wednesday. And I think it's going to be very different, but I think it's also going to be a very positive thing. and by the time I got done meeting with the president of the seminary, he and I met for like an hour and a half. We were supposed to be there for half an hour. We ended up talking for an hour and a half. And he's already coming up with these, like, I just, I had this list of things that he thought was going to be great for me to get into, and some stuff that he was looking forward to, and had all these great ideas and all kinds of things. So it was really nice to be able to feel like I'm walking into a place where I already feel welcome, where I already feel like they see like I have a valuable contribution to make. And so I think that it's gonna be very different, but I think it will also be a good thing,
That's cool. So you're gonna pursue everything the same you were before, I guess.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm going to stay an Old Testament major, and one of the other reasons I had to leave the other program is in getting rid of the academic track, they eliminated the option for a defended thesis. And it's important if you're going to do a PhD and do post-grad work. That's part of your curriculum vitae, or whatever that fancy term is. That's one of the things you submit as part of that process. And if you don't have it, that complicates and can add an extra year onto your program, because you have to take these extra classes to show them that you know how to write at an academic level. And it makes the whole thing a whole lot harder if you don't have a defended thesis. So the school where I'm at now has one. So now I get the chance to actually put together, and it'll take me the entire next school year to put that thing together. But they will also encourage you to do it in a way that is something, oh, bye, Sam. Yay, Merry Christmas. And I'm looking forward to seeing you around in the chat more. So, yeah, bye, Sam. That I think, I just lost my train of thought again.
Take you a year.
But it'll take me a year to write my thesis, but they want you to have something that's not just a thesis. It's something, he's like, a lot of our students are turning them into books and publishing them. So maybe I'll get to be just as obnoxious as Will Hess and shove my book all over the place.
Oh, you're talking about that guy that wrote a book, right?
That guy I think that's am I right about that, Roddy? Did Will write a book? I better have Roddy.
I heard that. Check. I think I heard that. Yeah.
I heard Will Hess wrote a book. Actually, that's one
about the atonement, yada yada. Something I forget.
I don't know. I told Will when I was messaging with him yesterday or the day before. I think it was yesterday. Like, yeah, me and my red pen are all ready. Next week, me and my red pen are going through your book, Will. And he was like, "No, I'm scared." It's like, be nice.
We'll get an AI generated thing where it's just all written out.
I was planning on just using the red one to even just highlight the good stuff and just make it all in red pen and send it to him and be like, "Look, I'm reading your book."
A+.
Yeah,
I want to read it. I still need to order. I'm going to read Tim Barber's book. I still haven't started that. So
yeah, that's the 3 books that I plan to read.
I'll read his probably. I think I'll read it pretty quick too. How big is the Will Hess book? Is that like looks kind of thick.
It's pretty thick. I have to go back and look. It's like 200 or 300 pages. I don't know.
Double space.
Maybe if you're lucky.
Little space, 12 font or whatever.
Yeah, I got into like the 2nd or 3rd page, and I messaged Will. I was like, "What's up with this typo?" I took a picture of it and sent it to him. And he was like, "Wait a minute, that wasn't there." Like, wow, it was fun. I've been having a good time razzing him about that book. I'm sure it's pretty good, because usually Will is pretty thorough. But yeah, so the 3 books I'm going to read over break are Will's book on atonement, Tim Barber's book, and then another one that's written by a friend of mine, Steve Heffley. I can't remember the name of the book off the top of my head. My brain's still a little jelloed. So, but it's a book about, I don't want to get this wrong, so I'm not going to say, because again, I think it's about the intermittent state, I think is what it's about.
Is that guy on the
yeah
overlap thing? Yeah, I think I saw that. I was curious. It sounds like he's a agrees with me, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's available on Kindle, and it wasn't that expensive.
Oh yeah, I want to
so,
get that. I'm curious. That guy messaged me one time, so I'm gonna
yeah.
do that one too.
He would be interesting to have on your show. I love Steve. He is a great guy. Because when he contacted me, hey, do you want to read my book and tell me what you think? I was like, okay, not really, but sure, why not? I'm up for reading stuff. And I started reading it, and I was like, oh boy, I don't know about this. So I got through the first chapter, and I had like a page and a half or 2 or 3 pages of questions. And so I reached out to him, and I was like, hey, I've got questions. Why don't you come and let's talk about this? And because I just like, I want to hear where he's going and hear his thoughts behind what I read before I read any more of this book. And we spent, I don't know, probably an hour and a half just hopped on StreamYard, not streaming, just, using it to video chat because it's really good for that too. But
Totally.
And he answered every single one of my questions. And he did a really good job. And he was actually open to feedback. He was open to, questions and thoughts that I had. And and it turned out to be a really good conversation. And I walked away from that going, even if I don't agree with where he ends up, he is definitely a respectable guy who's worth my attention, that his book is worth me reading because I know he's at least sincere in his desire for feedback and his desire to keep learning. And so that to me is highly respectable and something that is definitely worth my time. So that's my break plan is to get through those 3 books.
Yeah.
And then we'll see.
I've gotten 2 books from friends. That's about it. But
yeah, I would recommend Steve's book too to get through it. I should do an interchannel book club, Jamie.
That'd be fun.
Have a book of the month, and we go through it. But
I think
Steve is
Nick's gonna send me his thing when he's done. I guess I made him promise. He's my new friend.
I love Nick. Nick's a great guy. I get to hang out with him. His wife, if you think Nick is amazing, his wife is even better. That dude definitely married up. Let me tell you, his wife is amazing.
Oh yeah, I've never met her, but he's definitely probably all the way around. It's a real
yeah.
What do you call that? Step higher. Yeah, he married up.
Yeah, he definitely. I mean, I love Nick and respect the guy to death, but he definitely married up. Allison is amazing. She is just absolutely amazing. I got to spend some time with them. I went to their church when I was there, and Nick and I got tacos, and we went out and did some stuff, and it was just no, I wasn't there on a Tuesday, sadly, but it was good.
Right.
It was good though. But yeah, Nick is definitely a good dude. And so now I'm just kind of trying to this week I've been trying to take a break since I turned everything in on Wednesday. And just only do things that are fun and brainless and don't require me to think too hard. So and then spend the rest of the next month working on some stuff. I'm going to put out some more working on some stuff for this channel. And then I ended up getting invited to, and now I've joined on as a segment co-host for some stuff on Faith Unaltered. So now I'm a member of the Faith Unaltered crew.
But tell me about
officially.
What's
that was kind of crazy. So I'm going to be doing 2 different things for them. Well, a couple different things for them. I'm going to kind of help run the behind the show stuff with the pull-in comments and starring things and whatnot while David's on sabbatical for the next 6 months. So I'm going to be helping out learning how to do that because I don't know how to do that and I'm terrible at it. So they're going to teach me all that production side of stuff while I help out. And then the gal who was Courtney Trotter, who was on the Leviticus video that we did last week. She and I are going to have a segment, a show on Faith Unaltered called, I think, Hebrew Bible Breakdown is what we decided on. That might change, but that's what right now we've decided to call it. And we're going to get into talking about Hebrew. We're going to talk about the Hebrew itself, the language. We're going to talk about the way Hebrew works, the way that the mindset that goes into Hebrew, how to understand when you're reading it, like the imagery, how to understand poetry, how to, just basically understanding Hebrew so you can understand what you're reading in English better by having some more of that background and that history without actually learning Hebrew. So we're going to go into a lot of that. And then the other thing we want to do is bring on different scholars and talk about, their work, what they're doing, how to make it understandable and accessible to people. But our very first episode, I think we've decided, again, this could change because we're still hashing out all the details, but we're going to talk about methodology. And specifically, we're going to talk about the difference between historical critical and canonical narrative. So what we're going to do is compare those, because it's going to be the difference between like Tim Mackey in the Bible Project is going to be more intertextual canonical narrative. That's the framework that they're working through to get where they go. So text critical is going to be somebody more like Dr. David Allen and that new book that he just put out, the two Romans thing. I don't know. That's text historical critical. They're very different approaches. And so we're just going to do our whole first episode analyzing the two of them. What are they, explaining them, how they work, and the merits and the downsides of both, and how to tell what scholar is using which one, and what does that mean? How does that help me understand what I'm reading? And all of the talk about some of the misconceptions and some of that kind of stuff. So that's what we're going to talk about. Is that kind of stuff, and it's going to be a blast because Courtney and I we both love a lot of things. Yeah,
the intercontextual is going to be less sort of rigid exegetical, like one piece at a time, isn't it? Sort of thing. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Like it's more less like trying to. I don't know. You can help me understand that a little bit better. I'm reading on some of this now, but one's going to be more like constrained, it seems like, to specific.
Intertextuality and canonical narrative fall under this thing that's called biblical theology. So it's a biblical theology approach to saying that the entirety of the Bible has a big overarching story and a bunch of overarching interconnected themes. And so intertextuality, what it does is it will take themes within these books and within the Bible itself and pull all those together to help explain the imagery that you're seeing. So like I said, with the book of Isaiah, I did one of the assignments that I did for that class on the book of Isaiah was on salvation. And when I started working on it and I picked that one, the professor said to me, make sure you pay attention because Isaiah does something different with salvation than the rest of the prophets. And I was like, okay, that's weird. I hadn't really thought about it like that before. And then I was kind of stuck a little bit. And then he just happened to mention in a lecture about the interesting connection between salvation and healing in Isaiah. And then I was like, oh, okay. So then I went through and read Isaiah again, thinking about healing. And I was absolutely amazed because there is something in Isaiah that is unique, that makes a link between salvation and healing on a lot of levels. We're talking physical healing, spiritual healing, corporate healing. Like there's a lot going on there. And what intertextuality will do is it will take all of what Isaiah is doing there. And you can look at a story like in the book of John, I think. My brain is tired, so I'm not going to get these chapter verse references right. But the story where the friends
I'll
bring
correct you.
the paralytic and they tear open the ceiling and they lower the guy down in front of Jesus, right? And the first thing that Jesus says to him is, your sins are forgiven. And I always thought that was kind of a weird thing to do, but Jesus is God, so he can say whatever he wants, right? So I didn't, puzzle on it too hard, but it just always seemed odd to me. And then I went back after I read Isaiah through that and finished that paper. I couldn't get that story out of my mind. So I went back and I read it again because he says, your sins are forgiven. The Pharisees freak out. And I'm like, what's the deal? But then I'm like, okay, he is in your face with Isaiah to them. You don't even understand your prophets to know that when I say your sins are forgiven, I'm saying you're healed. And I'm like, holy moly. Wow. Like, that is crazy.
It's like when that is the Sabbath. It's like the same thing. He's like, what's easier for me to tell you to just take up your bed and walk, or that your sins are forgiven? Right? It's like,
yeah, it's there is a connection there. So there is, and I think in it, as everything all plays out and we get into the final day of the Lord and get into dwelling with Yahweh in the physical way that we are meant to dwell with Yahweh, that there is definitely a lot of healing that goes in with the final salvific piece of that. So, there's so many layers there, but that's one of the things that intertextuality does, is looks at all those themes and starts pulling all those together and makes all those connection points so that you can actually follow those themes from book to book and from testament to testament. So in Matthew in chapter 2 says, I have called my son out of Israel. Thematically, exactly what he's talking about on every prophet he's pulling from. And it doesn't have to be a word for word citation because you're understanding the theme of the prophet that he's pulling from.
I'm down with that.
Makes sense?
Right. Yeah, I think that's kind of the way I understand the Bible to a large degree, not in everything. I think on my view, Adventists are like, I have a few things on interpretive methods and stuff, like and he's talking about the problem. Adventists don't take on the historical critical method either, and well, never mind, I'll leave that alone. It's open up a can of worms.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll say it because I can, because I used, when I started, I was in the historical critical camp. But through the process of going through that training and learning from the man who trained Tim Mackie and Carmen Imes and Andrew Teeter and a whole bunch of people who now are at the front of the line making historic or canonical narrative and intertextuality a very legitimate and understandable way to read the Bible, and having a Hebrew professor who pounded it into your head that you have to understand the way that Hebrew thinks to understand the message that the author is trying to explain there, and how translation works, and getting this idea, because Hebrew is wonky. It is fun. It is wily. It is a little bit crazy, but it's also very simple. And so I just learning how to understand that, and how to understand the way that, so like Hebrew, it comes from the root language of, if you trace Hebrew all the way back, comes from the same historic language that you get Arabic from also. So they're connected. Hebrew and Arabic are connected, not Aramaic also, but Hebrew and Arabic are connected. And that was a really fun lecture to sit through and listen to him talk about the history of Hebrew and how that all works. But when you understand, as you're going through and learning Hebrew, and you start like figuring out how it works, and they're so insistent, my professors were, that you read it out loud, that there's something that is built into the way Hebrew works that is cyclical. It's liturgical. It's meant to be lived. It's meant to be meditated. It's meant to be repeated out loud, because it comes from a nomadic and semi-nomadic people. So you don't have them carrying big libraries around with them everywhere. A lot of it's story and a lot of it's poetry that is easily rememberable. So you can pass it along as you're moving, because not everybody, even for into the New Testament, not every synagogue could afford a scroll, let alone every scroll. It depended on your mental your memory, and you were to be a storyteller, right? So it really was. Yeah, go ahead.
So I just want, that's cool, by the way.
Mhm.
I just wanted to see what you like. I have this book. This is interesting.
Mhm.
I was thinking of that one, but like this is you probably have this if you have logos. I don't know if you do or not, but it's probably a basic thing you have getting a set. But allusions in the New Testament, and then you probably don't have this one, but it's a prophecy book, but it says it's the end times prophecy, but in a biblical contextual approach, and it talks about like let's see.
What's the name of it?
Let's see. It's by Rondell. It's an older book, I think. It's an Adventist book, but it's how to understand the end time prophecies of the Bible, a biblical contextual approach. It says like here's some of the chapters. Can you see that, or is it too small?
That I could see that, yeah.
Okay. So like some of the things you were saying, I was gonna see what you thought of it. Like what about organic unity of Christological and ecclesiological fulfillment? I've been reading this. The universalizing principle of Israel's territorial promises. Does that turn you off? The inadequacy of the hermeneutic of literalism. I don't know. Just curious what you would make of that sort of thing.
I'm not sure. I'm trying to look because I actually went and got a couple of Seventh-day Adventist library collections to add to my Logos. I just haven't had a chance to read them yet because I was listening to one of your things and was like, you know what? Actually, you have a valid point. I can't criticize the Seventh-day Adventists if I haven't read Ellen G. White's work. You're absolutely right. So I need to read it before I open my mouth. So
yeah, this
right.
We actually have scholars, but she is not a scholar. So, but she is they talk about it in certain things, but I really like Rondell. I think he's good. He's pretty respected, or like Gain or Peckham. Those are things I would check out. But anyways, if you see, anyways, I don't care. I'm not trying to push that on you anyway. So
well, I want to do a stream where you and I talk about about Seventh-day Adventists and get into some of this stuff. Yeah, so I want to actually plan a formal one to bring you on. But I want to do it on Faith Unaltered and make it big. So
cool. That's cool.
Yeah. So you and I will have this conversation.
Fan of Faith Unaltered, but not wanting to cause any issues or whatever too, because there's a few things we're going to just not get along on, but so much we do. So I don't know. I don't want to be a thorn in their side, but I do like the engagement and I enjoy it, and I think it's edifying. So and I like my friends. So
the other videos that I've done, Jamie, when I brought people on, because I've had Jacob Seiler from Tattered Bible Project on. He's Oneness Pentecostal, and he came on and he presented to me like what is Oneness Pentecostalism and explained it, and we just talked about and spent our time talking about, oh, actually, you know what, we agree about that, or we agree about that, or we actually think similarly there. We use different language to get there. So we spent the focus on where do we agree, because there's enough people fighting about the stuff we disagree with. We don't have to do that on my channel. We can talk about the stuff.
I know, I'm so sick of that stuff, man.
That's right.
I believe in the Trinity. It's a done deal for me. I don't need to argue with anybody anymore. It's like I'm convinced it's Jesus is God. Like, I don't know. I mean, it has its place. I'm just saying for me, I'm like, I think it's important and all that. I just, I hear you.
I'm more about what do we have in common? So those are the kinds of conversations that I have with people from different traditions that I bring on my channel. That's what we talk about. So that's what you'll expect when you come to have that conversation with me, is where do we agree, Jamie? Where do we have points of agreement? That's what I want to find. you know.
Jesus is a man and God and let's see.
Right.
Everybody needs
So
a little bit of rest in their life.
a little bit. So
I'm
figured I
losing
just
gas
mostly,
here.
I know. I was just looking at like it's been long enough. I just wanted to kind of just update everybody. Yep, I'm out of school. I'm transitioning to a new one. Joining Faith Unaltered. We'll still have Old Testament content coming out on this channel, which is going to free up some of this extra space and move some of that stuff to Faith Unaltered. So we'll get to just do Old Testament here. And the Leviticus video is turning into a series. And then I'm working on a Deuteronomy one after that. And then probably do a series on Torah, on what is Torah, and dig into all of the different meanings and all the different uses of the word Torah and what is it. And and so just you know, I really have some fun with the nerdy stuff that I really
thought of that earlier already.
And I really
Well,
love.
I'm so glad that you got everything figured out. I'm glad that that's over with, and it sounds like it's going to go good.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah,
and I'm looking forward to all your engagements on all these big channels as you don't forget about me as you ascend the ladder.
I
won't let
expect
you
to
forget
see
about me.
Pope Jamie had better show up in my chats in my live stream. Somebody's got to keep me honest, man. You know.
My ring. No. I will, and I will relinquish salvation at my whim. So, anyway.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks for coming to chat with me. Yep. So
I'm glad to hear all that good news. So have a Merry
let
Christmas.
you go, and I'm gonna go because I'm a little tired. You look like you could use some sleep as well, my friend.
I'm ready.
So
I'm just gonna shut off the light and just.
There you go. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming by. I appreciate you all. And we'll start putting out some content here in the next week or two. So go with God and be blessed.